This world wasn't always so small and petty. Thousands of years ago, while the rest of men prayed to gods, the Valyrians became them. Through magic or sheer will, they mastered the greatest creatures in history. A horse grants man dominion over the land, a ship over the sea. But dragons gave us the sky, and everything and everyone beneath it. At its height, my ancestors ruled the known world. Whatever parts we didn't weren't worth knowing. Our capital of Valyria shamed the magnificent cities of the east, for hammers and chisels were no match for dragon fire and sorcery. It was a city and an empire built to last until the end of time. It didn't. 400 years ago, the doom fell on Valyria. Mountains cracked open like eggs, lakes and rivers boiled, fountains of fire, ash and smoke spewed from the ground, so high and so hot that even dragons burned in flight. The land splintered, and the angry sea rushed in. In hours, the greatest city in history became history. But my ancestors didn't burn or drown with the rest of their race. 12 years before the doom, despite the sneers of his rivals, Aenar Targaryen abandoned the capital with his family. Legends claim that his daughter foresaw the destruction of the city in a dream. More likely, Aenar met with some mishap at court and chose exile over execution. He and House Targaryen slinked away to a dreary, remote, god-forsaken island. Forsaken no longer. With arts now lost to the world, we transformed a tiny outpost into Dragonstone, a fortress fit for the last dragon lords. Then Aenar's descendants settled into it like a tomb for their lost homeland. Until Aegon. When he looked east, he saw the past, old, tired, dead. But when he looked west, he saw the future. Gold in the ground, gold in the fields, and no dragons in the sky but his.
Westeros has mighty rivers, but none of them compare to the Rhoyne. It is said that there is no stream or puddle in Western Essos but drains to Mother Rhoyne. No doubt an exaggeration. Until one sees the river, at its widest, a man in the center can't see a shore to either side. The greatest of Mother Rhoyne's children were the Rhoynar, a civilization as ancient and grand as old Guise. Fishers, traders, scholars, workers of wood, stone and metal. The Rhoynar raised their elegant cities from the headwaters of the Rhoyne down to her mouth, each lovelier than the last. For many centuries, the Rhoynar lived in relative peace. When invaders swept down from the hills, the Rhoynar, women and men, would don silver-scaled armor, fish-head helms, tall spears, and turtle-shell shields. If the enemy did not laugh themselves away, it was said that Mother Rhoyne would whisper the enemy's secrets to her children, and the Rhoynish wizards could raise watery walls to drown their foes. Whatever magic the Rhoynar may have had, it wasn't enough. When Valyrian colonists first arrived, the Rhoynar embraced them, for all men were welcome to share the bounty of Mother Rhoyne. Perhaps a water people should have been more cautious of strangers who exalted fire and blood. Legend has it that one day the Valyrians netted and butchered one of the giant turtles the Rhoynar held sacred. As a result, thousands were killed or enslaved, cities and towns were burned, drowned and rebuilt. In these wars, the Valyrians emerged as victorious more often than not. The princes of the Rhoynish cities, fiercely proud of their independence, fought alone, whilst the Valyrian colonies aided one another. Eventually, the Rhoynish princes ceased their squabbling and united behind Prince Garren, who led the largest army Essos had ever seen, against 100,000 Valyrian colonists, 100 war elephants, and 3 dragon lords. Thousands burned, but thousands more sheltered in the shallows of the river, whilst the Rhoynish wizards raised enormous water spouts against the foe's dragons. Rhoynish archers brought down 2 of the dragons, whilst the third fled, wounded. and thereafter the Royner named Garren the Great. But Mother Valyria proved just as caring as Mother Royne. When Garren the Great marched his army against Volantis, 300 Valyrian dragons descended from the sky. Tens of thousands burned whilst others rushed into the river, but the fires burned so hot that the water boiled and turned to steam. Garren the Great was captured alive and made to watch as Valyrians butchered every last man, so many that their blood turned the great harbour of Volantis red as far as the eye could see. Then they forced Garren to watch as they marched on his own city and enslaved all the women and children his army had left behind. The singers claim that Prince Garren called out Mother Royne to curse the Valyrians, and she in turn flooded the city with foul waters and a damp fog that caused the skin of the Valyrians to harden and crack, and thus was born Greyscale. Fearing a similar fate, another Roynish ruler, Princess Nymeria, led her own people into every ship, skiff and raft they had, and fled Essos. Eventually, after much hardship, they landed in sun-swept and bone-dry Dawn. But we all know that tale. Now Valyria has followed the Royner out of this world, and her daughters have grown into free cities, wealthy and powerful and proud. Still, Mother Royne flows on, past ancient ruins and bustling harbors, sweeping all man's kingdoms to the sea.
According to legend, House Targaryen survived the doom of Valyria thanks to Daenerys the Dreamer, who foresaw the calamity and convinced her father to flee their homeland. It could be true. The Targaryens were always a bit more. But as Maester Yendel points out, in the east the Targaryens were one of 1,000 minor noble families, and in Westeros they became kings. Politics, not prophecy, could have drawn them to our shores.
East of Westeros lies the Smoking Sea, where no ship dares sail. There are those who swear it to be demon-haunted, and who's to say they're wrong? For it was there, thousands of years ago, that a cataclysmic event occurred, destroying one of the great civilizations in history. The precise details of their origins are lost to us, but it is said the Valyrians were once a modest community of shepherds, tending their flocks on a small peninsula of the great eastern continent. One fateful day, in a volcanic area known as the 14 Fires, they made a shattering discovery. Dragons. They were monstrous, scaled creatures with massive wings, sharp claws, and fiery breath. They were also said to have a deep-rooted connection to magic. In time, the Valyrians were able to tame the beasts. Harnessing their immense power, they established a city of wonder, unlike any before or since. They became skilled at sorcery and metallurgy, creating uncommon weapons of spell-forged steel. Wielding these weapons astride their dragons, the Valyrians conquered the surrounding lands and slowly expanded west. At the time, the Giscari Empire dominated much of the great eastern continent and tried to stop Valyria's expansion. The Giscari legions attacked the Valyrians 5 times, but could never defeat them. Finally, the Valyrians marched on their capital, Old Gis, and obliterated it, turning its streets and buildings to ash with dragon flame, and wiping the Giscari people and their culture off the face of the earth. The freehold of Valyria, as it came to be known, became the most advanced civilization in the known world, with its own language, gods, and culture. The Valyrians' reach extended far and wide, covering most of the continent. Great cities were built and roadways paved, all of which led back to Valyria. The freehold would prosper for nearly 5,000 years. But it was not to last. An event that became known only as the Doom laid waste to the Valyrians, their capital city, and its surrounding lands. The peninsula itself was shattered, becoming what is now the Smoking Sea. Every dragon was thought to be lost, as were the Valyrian spells, knowledge, and recorded history. Thus, the mighty empire collapsed. What caused this cataclysm? No one knows for certain. Some say it was a volcanic eruption. Others say the Valyrians' own sorcery got the better of them. In any event, the Doom's devastation of the Valyrian people was total, with the exception of a small rocky island in the narrow sea, Dragonstone. For it was there that the Targaryens, the last of old Valyria, dwelled. They would lie in wait for another 100 years before unleashing the fury of the dragon on another continent, Westeros.